Now we're going to demonstrate the reassembly of the American Tactical Bulldog Bullpup shotgun. We're going to start with our barrel here. Take your bolt and place it like it would be in battery. Make sure that the extractor is in the proper groove and this lug is in its proper place. And when you push it in there, it'll seat nicely in the barrel. And you take your barrel nut ring and place it on the barrel so that it can engage the threads of your upper receiver. And this little ring here has a flat bottom and a cupped area. The cupped surface is for the spring, of course. You don't want to let your bolt go. So your recoil spring here has a front and a back. Your front of the spring is going to be tighter than the back of the spring, and you'll notice that right away by the way the spring seats into that ring. Now you put your slide assembly over the barrel, and you want to pull it to the rear, compressing that recoil spring, and get it locked back into the bolt. And then the forward tension of the recoil spring will help keep the bolt in the barrel there. So, all right. The next thing you want to do is put your gas piston in, and of course the gas piston is supposed to fit together like this, and it is a tight fit, but it should be cleaned enough so that it's free. Now this locking nut that holds everything together has two sides. This flat surface is supposed to point downrange. The other surface has a rubber ring, and that rubber ring is supposed to be seated down onto your piston. Of course, you need to thread through all these threads. Hand tight is adequate. You don't need to wrench down hard on this nut. Just as tight as it will do by hand will be fine. And then you take your upper receiver and slide the bolt into the receiver, and then take your barrel nut. You gotta find where the threads match. And once you have that hand tight, you want to take your tool, and as tight as you can make that by hand will be adequate. Again, you don't need to wrench down on these threads. All right, the next part is going to be the foregrip. Sorry. Once you have it together, you take your Allen wrench and tighten down on these screws. Now again, you don't need to wrench down on them. They do need to be tight, but you don't need to squeeze these surfaces so that they're touching. They really don't need to be that tight. Just make sure that they're relatively tight, but one thing to consider is that once you tighten one of these screws, the other screw is going to become slightly loose. So you don't want to over tighten one screw so that you have to keep tightening the other, and then these surfaces will end up touching. That's not adequate. Just make sure that these are both taut to the feel, and that's adequate. You take this thick aluminum plate and slide it down over the barrel, and there we go. And then the barrel shroud. And again, hand tight is adequate. So as tight as that will go by hand is fine. Now you take your upper assembly and your lower assembly and fit the two together and drive the pins. Now, one thing I've noticed is pushing the upper and lower together makes it easier to get these pins to drive through. These are very tight tolerances, so if you feel like it's catching, just squeeze the upper and lower together tightly and the pinholes should match up. And the last part we have here is the cheek rest. You want to spread that open and put the screw through. And now your magazine. Now, after you've gotten it reassembled, what you want to do is make sure that it's assembled properly by doing a function test. Pull the bolt to the rear, get it to lock to the rear with the magazine. Let the bolt go forward. Now to check the reset, hold the trigger down. There we go.